Thanks very much for joining me. As I'm sure all Americans know, the war in Gaza began on October 7th when Hamas, a terrorist organization, invaded Israel, killed some 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and took over 230 people into captivity, many of whom are still being held. It has always been my view that Israel had a right to defend itself, respond to this attack, and go after Hamas. It is also my view that Israel does not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people, which is exactly what it is doing. Let's discuss briefly what's going on in Gaza. There are about 2.2 million people living in Gaza, mostly poor and struggling people. Since the war began, over 33,000 Palestinians have been killed and 77,000 wounded. Unbelievably, 5% of the residents of Gaza have been killed or wounded in a 6-month period. 2/3 of these people are women and children. Since the war began, 1.7 million people, over 75% of the population, have been driven from their homes. Over 60% of the housing units in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. This housing destruction is unprecedented in modern history. But it's not just housing. Israel has systematically destroyed the healthcare system in Gaza. Gaza had 36 hospitals before the war. Now just 11 are partially operational. Persistent attacks on healthcare facilities have killed more than 400 healthcare workers. But it's not just housing and the healthcare system. It's the physical, civilian infrastructure in Gaza, which is also being destroyed. More than half of the water and sanitation systems have been put out of commission. Only 1 of 3 water pipes is operating. Clean drinking water is severely limited, and sewage, raw sewage, is running through the streets, spreading disease. And as we speak, there is virtually no electricity in Gaza. But it's not just housing and healthcare and infrastructure that is being destroyed. There are 12 universities in Gaza. Unbelievably, each and every one of them has been either damaged or destroyed. In addition, primary and secondary schools have also been completely disrupted. 625,000 students have no access to an education. And as horrible as all of this is, there is something happening now that is even worse. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children face starvation. People in Gaza struggle to survive from day to day, foraging for leaves, eating animal feed, or splitting the occasional aid package amongst their families. At least 28 children have died of malnutrition and dehydration already, but the real toll is likely much higher. Let's be clear. These conditions are the result of Israel's arbitrary restrictions on the aid getting into Gaza. This is not a matter of debate. It is an obvious reality that numerous humanitarian organizations have repeatedly confirmed. For months, thousands of trucks carrying life-saving supplies have sat just miles away from starving children, prevented from reaching their destination by unreasonable Israeli restrictions and a military campaign conducted with little regard for civilian life. Blocking desperately needed U.S. humanitarian aid is obscene and unacceptable. It is also a violation of American law. The Foreign Assistance Act is clear. No U.S. assistance may be provided to any country that, quote, prohibits or otherwise restricts, directly or indirectly, the transport or delivery of United States humanitarian assistance, end of quote. Israel is clearly in violation of that law. What Israel is doing today in Gaza and the West Bank is a defining moment for Americans, because we are directly complicit in this horrific war. The U.S. military is not dropping 2,000-pound bombs on civilian apartment buildings, but we are supplying those bombs. The U.S. is not blocking the borders and preventing food, water, and medical supplies, from getting to desperate people. But we have supplied billions of dollars to the Netanyahu government, which is doing just that. The U.S. is not annexing occupied Palestinian land, but it is providing political protection for the Israeli government as it does that. Despite the massive financial and military support the U.S. has provided to Israel for many years, the right-wing extremist government of Benjamin Netanyahu has ignored increasingly urgent calls from the U.S. to end the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, to stop settlement expansion in the West Bank, and to lay out initial steps for a two-state solution. The American people have had enough. Poll after poll shows that they are fed up with Netanyahu's war against the Palestinian people and do not want to see their taxpayer dollars support the slaughter of innocent civilians and the starvation of children. The United States has offered Israel unconditional financial support for many years. In recent years, that has amounted to $3.8 billion a year, with numerous additional forms of support. Right now, against my vote, Congress is considering another $14 billion in military aid for Israel, $10 billion of which is completely unrestricted military funding. That unconditional support must now end. Instead of begging Netanyahu's extremist government to protect innocent lives and obey U.S. law and international law, our position must be simple and straightforward. Not another nickel for the Netanyahu government if their present policies continue. The United States must use all of the leverage we have to secure an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and across the region, and demand that the massive amount of humanitarian assistance that is needed to prevent famine and widespread humanitarian suffering is able to flow into Gaza. History will judge what we do right now. History will judge whether we stand with starving children, whether we uphold America's professed values, or whether we continue to blindly finance Netanyahu's war machine. Thank you.